So, on to our special guest this evening. And without too much ado, I'd like to introduce a man who Emmy Magazine says is a TV mastermind, and he really is. Dave Knowles is a two-time Emmy Award winner, a two-time Gracie Award winner, and has won the coveted James Beard Award for our best television series, Chopped. And besides Chopped, Dave has also produced 50 other television shows. So besides not sleeping at night, Dave, how did you do all of this?
Yeah, how did you get Chopped? My daughter and I used to watch every single episode of that.
I don't sleep at night, but that's because I have 3 kids. When I started out at MTV Networks, and I worked my way up from intern to production assistant, all the way up to producer. And when I was a producer, I just started creating shows. We were, at MTV Networks, working at MTV or VH1, producing a bunch of shows, and it was a great, amazing job interviewing famous people, flying around the world. It really was a fantastic job. At that point, I was 26, 27 years old, but for some crazy reason, I was the person who just kept saying, "Hey, what about this show? What about this show? What about this show?" And my boss at the time, the legendary Bill Brand, was incredibly nice. And at one point pulled me aside and said, "Hey, what you're doing is fantastic, but just so you know, it's really not the way it's done. You're an internal producer. And what really is supposed to happen is we take ideas from the outside." And he was like, "You might do very well if you left MTV Networks and were pitching shows from outside the network." And of course, at first you think, wait, is he firing? Is he trying to get rid of me? Is that what's happening here?
Yeah.
But I went home and talked to my wife and did it, and kind of took the leap and started pitching to places like MTV, VH1, Comedy Central, Nickelodeon. And that's basically what I've been doing now for, I guess, almost 20 years. Wow. And so Chopped was one of those shows. The woman I now create shows with, so since 2007, I've been creating and selling and producing shows with Cleve Keller, who I call the Mozart of unscripted television creation, because she is... she just has this amazing mind for creating shows and this amazing energy. And so the two of us have been creating together since, the first show we sold was in 2003. And we've been creating together exclusively since 2007.
Wow.
So do you come up with all the ideas yourself, or do you take ideas that other people bring to you?
We never take ideas from other people, just simply because we create so much. We're doing it literally constantly. We were on the phone this morning, I think starting at about 8:30, and my guess is between say 8:30 and 11 o'clock, we had talked about 4 or 5 different shows, just new ideas, things that have never seen the light of day, just working them, reworking them, because it's not only about the show itself and the beats of the show, but it's also about how to sell that show. I mean, that's really almost the most important thing, right? Because we're walking into a buyer essentially asking for, at the very least, a development deal or a pilot. But what we're really asking for is 10 episodes, or in the case of one of our game shows or one of our syndicated shows, you're looking at a first season that might be 65 episodes, or it might be 170 episodes. So you're asking for something pretty substantial. And so you better have a great pitch. You better have an amazing hook, a great line, something that they can really grab onto and fall in love with as much as we are in love with it.
Wow. So how do you decide which ideas are the ones that you'll pitch, and what factors go into doing that evaluation?
It's a ton of research. So we are constantly, reading Hollywood Reporter, Variety, Deadline, et cetera, et cetera. But then, talking to each one of these various buyers, saying essentially, how can we help you? What can we create that will fill a hole in your schedule? What would be, we say all the time, what would be the one thing that you're looking for? What's the type of show? If there's another show out there, what show do you watch and you wish that it was yours? And the interesting thing is, it's when you're selling a television show, you're not really just selling that show to that network or that streaming service. You're not really just selling a show to Netflix or HGTV or Food Network. You're selling also a show to that person, because you're looking for the champion on the inside, that person who's going to, as I say, fall in love with it as much as you, and then really usher it all the way through until that moment where you're on the air and keep everything in line. And so you're also pitching a specific person. You're literally saying, what's the show that, Elizabeth, what's the show that you want more than anything else, that you are going to fall in love with, that you're going to go into every board meeting and say, this is the show that's going to change our future?
In the industry, is somebody putting their career on the line when they take that, that champion role? Or is it just kind of understood that some are going to fly and some aren't?
It's always understood that, basically we found this out 17, 18 years ago. We went and we asked people, network executives, production company executives, of every X number of shows that gets on the air, how many shows do you need before you get a hit? And back then, and I would say it's probably the same thing now, is essentially 1 out of 8. So there's so much content and there's so many shows and there's so many shots on goal. But that this is an industry where most things are going to fail. So that said, the way we treat it is they are risking their jobs, really, because you want that much love. You want them to march into the room and go, I'll stake my job on this show. This is going to be the 1 out of 8 or the 1 out of 10 or whatever it is. This show is going to make our network.
Kenya, did you have to do that with Passage to Profit?
No, actually, it was a hit right from the gate. So we were fortunate. And no one was doing anything like it on the radio. So, that's where we had the advantage, right? So I think back to what you were saying in terms of creativity, like just finding that niche and finding something that works super well. And that hasn't been done that way.
It always helps. I mean, it's to have something that's never been done and yet is incredibly comfortable with people, with audiences. So I'm not sure exactly how you pitched this show, but to have any idea where you have an immediate frame of reference, we call it a one click. So there's an immediate frame of reference. 90%, 95% of what is going to happen, people immediately understand. And then one thing that's out of the box. So it's funny right now. We're looking at Louis here on the Zoom, and Louis has this sign behind him. Louis is going to present an amazing product later. I don't know what the product is, by the way, so who knows? But he's in front of a sign that says "Think outside the box," and I'm laughing because what we say is don't think outside the box, only because we've heard so many ideas over the years that are so out there that no executive could ever get behind it because it's just too complicated. They need to get the sales team and the marketing team and the programming team. So what we like to say is think just outside the box. You don't want to be in the box because in the box, every idea HGTV gets is exactly like every other, they've heard every version of House Hunters, right? But on the other hand, you don't want to think outside the box. There's this kind of grand, I'm going to come up with the next insane thing that's going to blow people's mind. And this is different. And that we've tried to pitch those never sell. But if you have a frame of reference on a show and then you come up with one thing that everyone can really hold on to, and this is landmark, this has never been done, that's usually something that might sell.
Yeah, having worked in a corporation at one point, it's tough to stick your neck out too far for something that's really so different that nobody knows what to do with it, right? And
it's tough to explain. That's that's the other thing we're constantly looking for, is that line, that something. I was at a party once, and it was right when Game of Thrones started, it was an acquaintance of mine, and she was like one of the first people who watched it, and she said, "Oh my gosh, Game of Thrones is amazing," and she was talking to this guy who had no idea what it was, literally no idea. And so he was like, "What? It's Game of Thrones. It sounds crazy. What is it?" And she said, "It's like Lord of the Rings, but it's on HBO." And he said, "What? Wait, so it has sex and violence?" And she's like, "Yeah, it has sex and violence." And she's like, "It's HBO." So he's like sex? And she said, "Yeah, like sex." And he said, "Like violence?" She's like violence. And I was like, well, there it is right there. Cause I don't, like I'd never seen the show before, but immediately I was like, oh, I get it. And then you watch the show. It's not exactly that, but right there is the immediate frame of reference. You get, okay, it's kind of like Lord of the Rings. I like Lord of the Rings. I watched all 3 of those movies. They were giant hits. But it's on HBO, and that immediately, like, all of a sudden your brain goes, oh, I get it. Oh, okay. And that's a great way to just start out, right? Because it's so easy then to get more viewers, because it's an easy, there's a giant frame of reference, and then you go from there. Or The Sopranos, right? It was, it's a mafia story, but it's a family drama. And that had never, ever been done. We all knew of the Godfather movies. We all loved Goodfellas, one of the greatest movies of all time, I think. But Sopranos was doing something different. It was set in those same worlds, but this is the family drama version. Again, you have that frame of reference, but one thing that's different.
Well, can I ask you a question about Chopped? So, because we love that
ask
show.
1,000 questions. I love that show. It is one of my very favorite shows.
Yeah, it was amazing, like the format and the speedy and all that. But you had to have it speedy for TV, because otherwise people, you're not going to watch a cake bake for 2 hours. Right? I mean,
although the big show before us, that was a cooking competition, was called Iron Chef. And it was it was originally done in another country, and then they brought it here to the United States, and it was on the Food Network, and the repeats of the version from Japan did really well. So the Food Network executives knew that cooking competition, did well. But we were the first people to say what you think, what is now so obvious, which is let's get it moving. And so our show was the very first show that had 3 competitions in the hour. And so essentially the pitch was, there was a lot involved in this pitch. But essentially the pitch was, it's Iron Chef meets the show Eliminate. The other people on this Zoom were too young to know the show Eliminate. But it was a trashy dating show where one woman would go on a date with 4 guys, and she would eliminate one right at the heart of every commercial break. So, who's she going to eliminate next? And then it was, again, trashy television where she would eliminate this guy, this guy, this guy. And then there would be one left, and whoever, then they jumped into the jacuzzi together, and that was that. So it was essentially, so the Chopped pitch was essentially think Iron Chef meets Eliminate. And obviously they had never heard that before. No one had ever done it before. Now every cooking not everyone, but almost every cooking competition has 3 competitions in the hour. At that point in time in 2007, when we pitched the show, no one was doing that.
So did you get to pick the judges and the people that, because part of it is the personality, right? So
yeah.
I mean, a lot of these, we watch like these home improvement shows, and, it's the interplay between the man and the woman who are like, this, that, the other thing. So did you get any input into that?
We had an outstanding team we had an outstanding casting team, absolutely outstanding. And right from the very beginning, the whole goal was with the 4 chefs that are competing, make sure you instantly have someone to root for and or root against. Make sure you can immediately keep them separated in your head. All of that is deceptively difficult, because if you had 3 people and you were confused for a moment, you'd flip the channel. And that's one of the things about television you have to keep in mind, especially in unscripted, is you don't want people confused. If you're doing a game show, a competition show, it's just like a sporting event. As soon as somebody sits down and says, how do they get the 10 yards? I don't understand the 30 downs. They're not watching that football game, right? Unless you can explain to them, well, they get 4 chances to go 10 yards. Those are called downs. But if you don't have someone there to say that, you're not watching football because you're so confused. That's the same thing with game shows, competition shows, but even a format like House Hunters, you have to immediately understand what's happening. And if you're confused for a second, that show's not going to do well.
Wow. Well, I'm certainly taking your advice to heart here. And I know that, well, I think the entertainment business is certainly one of the toughest, because if you're pitching to a mass audience, figuring out that sort of grand psychology that is going to attract a large crowd is pretty interesting. And it does make sense to me why you would take baby steps, because the goal of television programming is entertainment, which in turn drives ad revenue. And you want to make sure that you stay on the rails that work pretty well. Are there shows out there that you found did surprisingly well that maybe you didn't think would do so well in the beginning? Or have you always kind of been able just to call it early on?
We're kind of, as I say, we do a lot of research. We're obsessed with whatever the new formats that are out there. The most recent one that Cleve called its success almost instantly. Honestly, I think she got it from the first announcement. Is the show The Masked Singer, which is a gigantic hit for Fox. It's about to enter season 5. And I will say, we had meeting after meeting, we're pitching other stuff, but at the beginning of those meetings, you're talking about the latest hits. And there was executive after executive that were like, oh my God, have you seen The Masked Singer? That's going to tank. Like, it's ridiculous. It's got Ken Jeong and Jenny McCarthy. Crazy costumes. Someone's dressed like a hippopotamus. This is insane. And I'll say, right from the beginning, Cleve was like, this is going to be gigantic, because it's a performance show. So, it's all, even the color scheme reminds you of American Idol. It reminds you of like those shows we've all been watching now for 20 years, right? Or 15 at least. And yet it has this one big, gigantic hook. Who's behind the mask? And that, she's like, that's as tried and true as Murder, She Wrote. Who's the murderer? She's like, that is going to be a gigantic hit. And she said it right from the beginning. And I will say, at first I was like, really? You're crazy. It's got a butterfly and a hippo.
Well, Murder, She Wrote, they have a murder a week in Cabot Cove. It sounds like a pretty dangerous place to me. Every week there's a new murder.
It's like it has 30,000 people population. It's amazing there's anyone still alive.
My brother used to say, don't ever hang out with Jessica Fletcher. Don't do it. Someone will die.
So Kenya, I know you've got something to say here.
Yeah, well, Dave, I see not one, but 2 Emmys, and they look pretty real behind you. So what is this?
That was just that I didn't do that on purpose. It's just,
no. They're so cool. I'm so fascinated by them. So what is the secret sauce to getting one of those?
That is luck. I'll tell you that is absolute luck. It really is. Like Emmys, you have no idea what's going to win. Every time you think you're doing well, you'll lose, or you won't even get nominated. And that's why when you see award shows, especially the Emmys, people are so shocked when they win, because none of us, there's never a moment where you think, at least in all my entire career, there's never a moment where I thought, oh, well, this is going to win an award. Like serious, like people say it like maybe the camera guy or the, some lady with a clipboard will be like, oh, I think this could win awards. And they're like, no, it won't. It's not going to. It never does. So
well, they keep it that way, right?
That is
so
luck.
They want people to be surprised, maybe.
And I was, because I just heard Jason Sudeikis talking about how surprised he was for Ted Lasso. And if you watch Ted Lasso, which everybody should, he's so great in it. But he was like, we just made this crazy show in England. I for, one of the streaming services, I didn't even think people were going to watch it. And then all of a sudden, bang, now I have an Emmy Award. And I think that's all you can do is once you finally get that show up and running and they give you the 10 episodes or the 170 episodes, all you can do is hire the very, very best people. And then you just want the entire group of 100 plus humans to work as hard as possible towards the common goal of let's make the greatest television show of all time. And it's not going to be, Chopped or Seinfeld or Ted Lasso, but every once in a while it's Chopped or Seinfeld or Ted Lasso. And you it's amazing. And you're thrilled and you can't believe it.
So Dave, there's a lot of competition channel wise, like streaming, like Netflix, like Hulu, like Roku, like Apple, so, and then the networks, of course. And then, so do you have to pick one of those? Like, how do you decide where you're going to pitch the show?
Paul McCartney talks about writing songs and writing, with John Lennon, and how songs come from all these different places where it's sometimes you hear a chord and you're like, oh, that's the chorus. Or sometimes you write a line and he's like, then the whole song comes from that line. Or John comes in and says he's like, I've just been thinking this as I was walking over here. And that turns into, a hit song. And so every show we've ever worked on, the pathway is so different. And not only creating it, but pitching it is the same thing. Some shows, we were literally talking about a show an hour ago where we might only pitch it to 2 places, but we love it so much that we're going to reach out to those 2 places and pitch that show. And then some shows are these big, oh my gosh, we could pitch this 22 places. But that's basically what you're dealing with. Sometimes it's 1 or 2, and sometimes it's 20 or 22.
Well, I just want to point out that a lot of what you're saying on a smaller scale is applicable to entrepreneurs. And I think where you've been successful.
1,000%. That's definitely what I've learned over the years is that I call myself a TV entrepreneur just because, everything I've ever read from all the great entrepreneurs, and I have books and books and books on this, it's all that same thing, which is you're trying to create some sort of unique hook that captures as many people as possible, especially what Cleve and I are really trying to. We're not trying to create a niche show. We're really trying to create the next Survivor, Wheel of Fortune, Family Feud, Got Talent, House Hunters. We're trying to create a show that my 13-year-old daughter can watch and my 99-year-old grandmother can watch. And that's what so many products are too, where you're just trying to get as many potential eyeballs as possible, as many potential buyers as possible. And so much of what I read in all those entrepreneur books, it's exactly the same as what we do. We just do it, on a very kind of grand, heightened, exhausting level. But if you're an entrepreneur, whether you're starting a new board game or starting a new box business or starting a new website, you similarly have to pour your soul into it and throw everything at it. And that's the only way to make it huge. 99 times out of 100.
So what's the most important thing about the pitch?
It's so hard. It's simplicity, and yet one aha moment, magical moment, something that they can fall in love with. Simple, simple, simple. And yet one thing that they're going to go, oh, shoot, Dave and Cleve did it again. Look at that. Can you give us a couple of examples of those hooks? Literally, let's go back to Masked Singer, right? Like it's literally, it's a, that pitch. If we were pitching that show, we would go in and be like, hey, we have your next performance competition show. Think American Idol, think The Voice, but we're going to do one thing you've never, ever seen before. And it is going to blow people away. we're going to have a performance competition. It's going to be gigantic performances, but instead of the next 20-year-old singer trying to become Taylor Swift, we're going to have celebrities in outrageous costumes, and you're not going to know who's behind the mask. The show is called The Masked Singer, and over the course of 13 episodes, you have to figure out who are these insane major celebrities behind the mask. One's going to be dressed like a butterfly. One's going to be dressed like a unicorn. One's going to be dressed like a bunch of string beans. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But that is and you can see kind of what I've done there is there's a gigantic frame of reference. So it's very clear for everybody. We all picture American Idol right away, right? We all know what that looks like. And yet then there's one thing that they can go back and go, but it's going to be celebrities and they're going to be in crazy costumes. So for that, you'd probably bring in just examples of what the costumes might look like and then say, and you know who's behind that costume? It's going to be, a major celebrity. I would imagine they didn't pitch it with Donny Osmond in mind. He was in the first season. I know Donny, so I can make fun of him. So you pitch with and behind the mask is some big star, but then, you settle for Donny Osmond.
Well, he's not small potatoes, right?
No, and he's extremely talented, and dude can sing insanely.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
That is a fun show. Well, I really hope you come up with another really cool new show. I've been watching some of the.
So do I, and the owners of my third daughter's college really would like you to come up with another good show.
Well, I've been watching some of the game shows, and they're okay, but I don't reserve the time so I can tune in.
I think we've watched a lot of Family Feud episodes. Steve Harvey is
Steve Harvey.
I just
right?
I look at that guy and it's like, how does he do that? And
when you go, so I've been and watched the show live. He is a monster. He just pours himself into. I mean, they can shoot 6 episodes a day. And when you go, he's basically just nonstop funny from the moment he hits the stage, during every commercial break, anytime they have to stop down, the whole audience is going crazy the entire time. And that's what a game show can do, is just be magical, right? Like, look at what has now happened with Jeopardy just over the course of the last 5 years. Where now, they've done this Jeopardy Tournament of Champions. Wheel of Fortune is now just doing Celebrity Wheel of Fortune. There's just something about a game show where it taps into, I don't know, all of us when we were sick and we would watch game shows as a kid, or, you flip on the TV and that puzzle sound from Wheel of Fortune, or the tick, 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 tick from the wheel goes around and you just have to solve that puzzle. And that's what we're looking for with Chopped or America Says or any of the shows we create. Those things that everybody can watch and fall in love with and watch 1,000 times, for the next 50 years.
Well, thanks to you and the people who can do that, because that's a special type of magic. And we have to take a break now, but we'll be back with more Passage to Profit right after this. Our special guest, Dave Noll.
You're listening to Passage to Profit, the Inventors Show on WOR 710, the Voice of New York. We'll be right back.